Alrighty. So we are picking up on page 64. We're in the chapter How It Works. First full paragraph. It's going to start with therefore. David, want to set anything up, recap, maybe leading up to this point?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit of a
Yeah, please.
preview of, post view of what we went through last week. So if we go to the top of page 64, in paragraph 0 up there. So let's start with the first full sentence. It says, though our decision, the decision that we're talking about there, is our third step decision. It is just a decision. But here it is. It's vital and it's crucial. And the crucial comes from the Latin word of crossroads. So I'm at a crossroads of this crucial, vital decision, and it could have little permanent effect unless it at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves that have been blocking us. Blocking us from what? Blocking us from power. God of our own understanding, a higher power. So the third step will have very little, any effect at all, unless we follow it up with this permanent. We'll have no, unless we have this strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves internally. Remember about this disease. It's an internal illness with an internal solution. So that kind of just sets us up, I think, and then again, so the last sentence there is, so we must get down to causes and conditions. So, and I put the word must in there because we see the word we had to is a must. 139 of them in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, as far as I can tell, and get down to causes and conditions. So to analyze our defects, that's what we're talking about there. And we will find out all about them now as we're going through the fourth step.
Okay. Thanks, David. So we're going to jump into the copy here. And we do have, because we're going to be talking about writing an inventory, which there's directions for in the chapter here, as we're obviously going to spend a lot of time the next few weeks covering. We also have a little cheat sheet that we're going to show at some point, probably each of these weeks. That can be a tool to use in organizing the inventory. So we'll get to that a little later tonight.
Hey, can I jump in one more little
Please,
thing? This is
please.
a big history moment for us in Alcoholics Anonymous. And
Oh,
I know
yeah.
this is not an AA meeting today, but just we are studying the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, so this is
Good
apropos.
call. Yeah.
85 years ago today, April 10th in 1939, 4,730 copies of the first edition of the Big Book was published at $3.50 a copy. That would be $60 today in our monies. While it's never been on the New York bestseller list, yet one of the best-selling books of all time, having sold 40 million copies, regarded as some of the greatest and important books ever written, the Library of Congress labeled it one of the 88 books that shaped America. Its influence on the world's health and treatment of alcoholism and other addictions is immeasurable. The wisdom from the Big Book is unprecedented. So let's celebrate what we're celebrating today. 85 years ago, guys, just think about that. Who saved millions and millions and millions of lives.
We're all alive today because of this, right?
Absolutely.
In part. Okay, here we go. First full paragraph on 64. So just wrapped up that last paragraph David mentioned. So we had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. Ab, nothing? Okay.
So when we look at this is a business that takes, so he's using a business metaphor, right? So, but let's change this to a personal inventory. Let's talk about what we're really doing here, because he's using words like a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. taking a commercial inventory, I would change the word to a personal inventory, which is and before that is a personal inventory, which is an itemized list. I'm going to have an itemized list. David's going to show it to us later on. But taking a personal inventory is a fact finding, which is searching, and a fact facing, which means fearless, without fear. It is an effort to discover the truth. So morally, internally, about the stock and trade. What is the stock and trade? Well, I am the stock and trade. I am the stock and trade here. And it says one object is to disclose the damaged. So these flawed things, this process of all these defects of character internally inside of me, angers and fears and harms done to others, or unsellable goods. To get rid of them promptly. I can get rid of them promptly and without regret. And by the way, we also have a process in Alcoholics Anonymous, in the directions in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, on how to get rid of them and have them completely removed where they never come back. We take them to 6 and 7 in God, and we also have a discipline of 10 and 11 and 12. Not to say that we can't go back and do written inventories. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But I can be rid of these things. God can remove these because I don't have the power to remove these defects of character. But I also can have this inventory process done with steps 10 and 11 and 12 on a daily basis. And then let me finish that paragraph. The owner of the business is to be successful. I'm going to be successful. I cannot fool myself about truth. Values are truths. I need to know the truth. That's what we're going to find out here. And by the time we get to the 5th step, we're going to find out a whole lot of truths. And where there is truth, there is God.
Anybody here ever work in a warehouse, or anybody here ever work in like a restaurant, right? A grocery store, retail environment? Yeah, I mean, many of us have, right? And so the matter of inventories is, I want to make sure everyone's appreciating why Bill is trying to use this metaphor, right? This analogy. So I do this for a living. I sell software. I have a business that companies use to run, like accounting and inventory management, among other things. And so we got this computer software, and it's got a list of all the inventory. And it says, we got widget A, we got 1,000 of those, and it's in this Bay Area. And then we got widget B, and we got 500 of those, and it's in this slot. You got this whole list, and in the software, everything looks perfect. You look at the report in the software, you're like, well, I got 1,000 of these, 500 of these, 10,000 of those, and it's all perfect, right as rain, ready to sell. And on my balance sheet, I got a value for all this. Oh, this is worth 1,000. This is worth 5,000. This is worth 100,000. All this looks great. But periodically, what happens in these businesses is we do what's called, they call it cycle counting, or taking a physical inventory. When they print that report out of the software and they hand it to the guys and the gals who work in the warehouse and say, go take a look at that. And what happens a lot of times in these warehouses or in these restaurant stock rooms? Well, they say, hey, boss, we're supposed to have 1,000 units of widget A, but I checked everywhere and we've only got 900. And of those 900, there's another 50 that are broken or spoiled. Right? So what happened to those 100? Maybe someone stole them. Maybe they were sold and the sale didn't get processed correctly. Who knows? Any number of reasons. What's the problem that comes up here? Everything looks great on paper. We think we got 1,000 of these units and we can sell them to make so much money. I don't really have that stuff. I have missing inventory. I have damaged inventory. That's why he starts off by saying here, a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Maybe I got a bunch of people with sticky fingers. What happens if I go 5 years without taking inventory? I might stroll back into the warehouse myself one day and find out I got nothing there. Maybe people have been robbing me blind, right? And this isn't a rant on my part about the honesty of people working in warehouses. It's to carry this idea that I need to know exactly what I have and what I don't have. And of the things, the qualities that I think I have, I need to get a real fact-facing assessment of how strong and sturdy and healthy they are. And as we get into the multi-column inventory, we're going to talk a lot more about fact finding and fact facing. We're going to talk about these 4 columns, and some of those columns are around finding the facts, in some of those columns around facing the facts. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. So here's a question. Let's turn it, as we do so frequently, let's turn this statement into a question. Am I convinced that self manifested in various ways is what has defeated me? I mean, we just spent a whole lot of time in the pages leading up to this. It was introduced to me really heavy-handedly on page 60, talking about what's the root of my problems? Me. If you weren't here with us and you haven't studied this in the book, I am the root of my problem. Acutely, self, right? Self-centeredness, selfishness, self-seeking, right? Self-pitying, self-reliance, self-anything. So am I convinced? Now I'm going to say, is it possible to go into the fourth step unconvinced that self had defeated me? I'm going to say in my personal experience, yeah, it is. And I'm also a big advocate of this concept that, man, you know how easy it would be for all of us to get sober and recovered if we just believed everything that our sponsor, our step guy told us? But how many of us had that experience? Very few of us, right? We stayed stubborn and willful and argumentative. But I'm a big advocate of doing the mechanics of the work, because in my experience, the mechanics eventually turn into miracles. The more action I take, the more work I do, the more I start to break down those barriers. So it's wonderful if I've got a newcomer and they are fully convinced that self is what has defeated them. But I just want to be sort of practical about this. I've made that decision in 3, but am I really fully convinced, especially if I'm new? I don't know. Go ahead, David.
Yes. So David, I love what he talks about. The fourth step is a celebration. It
Yeah.
really is, has to be, because what we're going to do is we're going to find out some truth about myself. We're going to have this 4 or 5 column inventory here. And what we're going to find out is in this paragraph, we're talking about, we did exactly the same with our life. So no longer a business metaphor. We took stock honestly. So honestly, in the inventory process of the business metaphor, I'm looking at the stock that David described to us. What do I honestly have in stock? And for me, first we search. Here's what we do. First, we search our flaws, our defects, the things that are blocking me, and our makeup, which caused our failure. So, what were some of those things? We read about this in the big book. If I go to page 52, am I having trouble with personal relationships? Could I control my emotional natures? These are the bedevilments. Second paragraph, second sentence on page 52. Am I prey to misery and depression? Could I make a living? Did I have feelings of uselessness? Was I full of fear? Was I unhappy? Could I seem to be of real help to other people? That is a great description of the unmanageability in my life. I don't have a drink problem today or a drug problem, but I have an unmanageability problem. But what I have done is I have fired myself from my management position, my CEO position, my COO position. I'm not even on the board any longer, not managing my own life. But I find these common manifestations because I've considered this, that my life run on my own free will could hardly be a success. We study this stuff. We went to page 62. We found the selfishness, the self-centered, the root of our troubles. We found out that my troubles are my own making. So if I stop making problems for myself, I won't have all these troubles today. But the common manifestations that we're talking about are not just the bedevilments on page 52, but it's also my angers, my fears, and my harms, my guilt, my remorse, and my shame. All these things show up into me and they block me from the power in my life because I don't have the ability to remove that selfishness, self-centeredness either. And it details that in the book prior to the last couple of pages. The same thing is true here. I don't have the power to remove these defects of character, these shortcomings, these flaws in my own makeup here. but they did cause my failures if I consider these. And what do I mean by consider? It means actually giving some thought, not an obsession, but some thought, and to take this home in some kind of prayer about these things. And then again, this is a written inventory. This is the mother of all inventories here.
Mm.
I'm going to do this work. Now, a lot of times, my experience is I've sponsored hundreds of people since I've been around, and a lot of times, what happens is they do three. We get on our knees, we say the third step prayer, and then we get ready to do four. And their external world starts getting a little bit better. You know, they got to apply for a new job. They got it. Now things are getting busy at work. You got to look for a little overtime. Now I got to come home and spend some time with the kids, and they got to cut the grass, and they got all these other responsibilities. Where's sobriety at and all that stuff?
Mm.
It's got to be God first, sobriety second, and all those other things come after that. And I lose my priority, and all of a sudden things pop up, and the manageability comes back first, and then the obsession comes back. And then I pick up a drink, and I break out in craving, and I can't tell you when I'm going to stop. As we get farther into this, I'll point out what's going to happen with this malady a little bit more, and how it's going to lead me back to a drink. And untreated alcoholism, behind that harm, behind that anger, behind that fear, behind that resentment, is a drink.
And just to recap here, I want everyone to be clear about this paragraph is a series of directions. Now they're sort of broad, and we're going to get into much more specific direction as we continue the chapter. But it's saying the first sentence, direction. We did the exact same thing with our lives. What's that same thing? Well, we're going to go do a fact finding and fact facing inventory. This is direction. Then what's the next piece of direction? We took stock honestly. Now, I just a couple of minutes ago said, do I have to be fully convinced to write my fourth step, right? That self-manifested in various ways is what had defeated me. And I already said no. But do I have to be honest to write an effective fourth step? I will say emphatically yes. And I had this, there are two qualifiers, two conditions, and it's going to be recapped after the chart, but I'm just going to get it out now. How do I know if I wrote a fourth step the right way, or you have a newcomer, I don't know if I'm going to do it the right way? Were we honest? Was I honest? And was I thorough? That's it. If I'm honest and thorough, I'll be okay. But if I leave some stuff out, I bend the truth, I omit some things, I will not get the promises of the fourth step, nor will I get the increasing freedom and spiritual awakening that comes from progressing through the steps. I mean, it must be honest. So that's direction. We took stock honestly. Then what's the next piece of direction? Well, search out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. David talked about that. And then the last part is I've got to consider its common manifestations. What's the its, right? How that's a reference to how self manifested, how it appeared in many ways was what had defeated me. I need to look at all the very regular ways and how that went down. And the reason why it's saying common or I'm saying regular manifestations is if you're like me, you'll have a very long inventory and you will see a lot of things that are very consistent. Right? Line after line. The person was different. The situation was different. Everything in my third and fourth column was damn near identical. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Okay, let's just pause right here. So let me read this, guys. Resentment is the number one offender. Resentment destroys, you know what destroys means? Kills. Resentment kills more alcoholics than anything else. Think about this. This is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, guys. What could this say? Couldn't it say alcohol is the number one offender? alcohol destroys more alcoholics than anything else? It doesn't say that. It tells me resentments are going to take me down. And we talk about this a lot because many of us, and again, a lot of people here in different fellowships, some of us put down the alcohol. And what other destructive behavior did we pick up? Right? Why? Because I was at sea, alone, adrift in all those bedevilments that David talked to me about. And I might have been patting myself on the back that I wasn't drinking anymore. But was I smoking weed? Was I doing coke? Was I womanizing? Was I spending? Was I compulsively eating? Right? All these things are just the symptoms. And they're all born out of my life filled with resentments. Resentments will kill. Resentments do kill.
Yeah, the minimum benefit here is that I could get free of my addiction. The maximum benefit here is I get free of my unmanageability in my life, and I have a God in my life who's running the show now. So resentment is the number one offender. Like David said, it's like I never knew that. I always thought it was a drink problem. I just thought it's innate. It's inside of me. I can't control it. Once I started, can't stop. I got that kind of stuff. And once I stopped, I couldn't stay stopped. And the unmanageability, I read about it and I didn't quite make sense to me. Or I read the bedevilments. It's like I started saying yes to all those things. But what is a resentment? Resentment is a thought that I resend through my mind over and over and over again. And every time I do that, you get a little worse. I get a little better. You get a little worse, and I get a little bit better. And now it's delusional. It's not even truthful any longer. And you know, here's the deal. I drink the poison and hope that you die. That's the resentment. Yeah. I hope that you die I drink the poison. The poison is the resentment, and it will kill. David used the word destroy. That means dead. Like gone, can't come back. How many of us know people who just wouldn't do this work? That just their external world just started getting a little bit better, and they didn't do this. Remember the time frame between step 3 and 4? It's none, zero. It's immediate, vigorous action has to take place. I must do this if I'm going to get well. I have to get rid of these unsellable goods in my life. I have to be free of this resentment that I can't remove on my own power anyways. And this will destroy more alcoholics than Bill's not jackhammer effect. More alcoholics than anything else. Maybe everything else combined. That I have to know, and I think that's where we stop. So I guess we should finish that paragraph because there's so much more to it.
Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From resentment, stem all forms of spiritual disease. For we've been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. There's a lot in these. I'm going to pause here again. Let me reread this last sentence. I mean, we'll go over all of this, but I love pointing out the frequency or the time reference. David just said there's no time between 3 and 4. It's next, which means get right into. And I love when there's an order of operations. Here's the order of operations in the spiritual awakening and how I get better. When the spiritual malady is overcome, my unmanageability is overcome, when I'm spiritually fit and I've developed a relationship with God as I understand him to this point, then I straighten out mentally and physically. It must happen in this order, guys. Because my spiritual malady, my unmanageability, again, if you're anything like me, that goes way back before I picked up my first drink or my first drug. Right? The spiritual malady is pervasive. It's been around my whole life. It's my defining characteristic, and then it exemplifies itself in all those bedevilments, right? All those behaviors, all those things that are going to get identified in 4 here. Must take care of that. And then my powerlessness will be muted, put on hold. I'll be safe and protected from it.
Yeah, so it says from it stems all forms of disease. So when I'm feeding my plan, guess what I get? I get the spiritual dis-ease, discomfort, Dis-ease. Break the word disease down. That's what it is. Dis-ease. For we have been not only mentally, so if you like to put a note up there about that, it would be obsession, and physically, which is the craving, we have been spiritually sick, which is the malady. Remember something, guys. This is so important for me. My unmanageability, my untreated alcoholism, my spiritual malady, they all mean the same thing, must be overcome, or liquor or cocaine will become my solution again. That is my experience. I haven't had a drink and a drug in a long time, but I remember trying to get sober on my own power, not doing any of this work here, trying to overcome on my plan. David and I always tell the treatment center people, we'll be there this Friday. If you have a plan, don't use your plan. Tell us your plan. Scott Redmond used to be a circus speaker. He passed on. He was a great, great speaker. And he used to say, wouldn't it be a great book to have a collection of newcomer plans? It would be hilarious to read all these things, right? Because my plans don't work. We have directions. The treasure map is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous here. The spiritual malady will be overcome if we straighten out mentally and physically. That's the order of that's the order, a marching order right there. Remember, my unmanageability, my spiritual malady, and my untreated alcoholism. Those are all the things when I'm not working any steps here. Must be overcome. Must. Or there's a drink and a drug behind those things. There's a drink and a drug behind all those things. I don't care how many 24 hours. And something I wanted to point out too. What was it here? Resentment is the number one offender. Anybody go to meetings where somebody's got 25, 30 years and they talk about a resentment all the time? And they bring it up every freaking time. Dude, I don't know if they're hard drinkers. I'm not trying to take their inventory or anything like that. That destroys people too, because it destroys relationships. The page 52 of the Bedevilments, those things are alive and well in my life. I'm still having problems with personal relationships. Well, my wife, my kids, coworkers, people in traffic, at the bank, at the grocery store, everybody's pissing me off. Irritable? Yeah, I'm irritable. I'm restless and discontent. Bottom of page 28 in Doctor's Opinion. Irritable? Everybody's irritating me. That is the resentment I'm carrying around with me. That is why it destroys me spiritually. I will never get well mentally and physically then. And it's probably going to destroy me in a way that it will kill me, either through suicide or I drink and drug again. I don't want to be miserable. I came in here for one simple reason. Yes, I had a drink and drug problem, but I loathed myself and the person I had became. I wanted to change. I didn't even know what you guys had to offer. This book offers so much freedom from self. And if you don't mind, go back to page 62 and find out first paragraph, because self is the problem. And it says selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root to our troubles. How deep is that root? It's very deep. I can tell you that for me. Now I'm not in charge anymore, according to the next sentence. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. 400 things. I love being dramatic. Bill does it too. Let's be dramatic about it. There's 400 things blocking me from this power. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. They push back. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. Like, that wasn't a good reason to push back. Yes, it was. I stepped on your toes. But we invariably find that at some time in our past, we have made decisions, wait for it, based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. My problems are coming at me. They're coming from me.
Thanks. So I want to ring the bell a little bit more on when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. And if we go back to 58 rather, 59, sorry, I'm getting all my numbers jumbled. Back to where we get the steps. So step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. I want to sort of, in that context of the statement of the first step and the content of this book and what is said here on 64, right? For we've been not only mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. I want to caution everybody about trying to draw a sort of fallacious causality between the powerlessness and the spiritual malady, right? My spiritual malady does not make me powerless over alcohol. I'm just going to talk about alcohol since we're coming into this book. My powerlessness does not cause my unmanageability. Now, when I yield, as so many do, and I give in, and then I trigger the allergy, do I exacerbate the unmanageability in my life? Yeah, you bet your bippy, because I'm going to go and get into a lot of trouble. I'm going to do a lot of harms. Right? But it's so important that I have to understand my main problem is my unmanageability. It's my spiritual illness. And that's why I've got to get right with that first. Anybody here able to white knuckle it for some days, some weeks, some months? Eh, how'd you feel? Worse, probably, right? Those first couple of weeks, first month or so for me, when I was white knuckling it before I started to get involved in the solution, it's very difficult for me. I didn't have my solution, which was alcohol and other drugs. I say this frequently. The power, and I'll just sort of talk about AA as an example. My powerlessness over alcohol, my mental powerlessness that always has me drink again, and my physical powerlessness that always has me break out in craving when the booze passes my lips. That's what qualifies me for my seat in the room to be a member of the fellowship. But is my unmanageability, my spiritual malady, that qualifies me for the solution, which is to have a spiritual awakening. That's all we have to offer here is a spiritual awakening. Now, are there other things that we benefit from? Like we make great relationships and friendships because of the fellowship and so many other things? Absolutely. But the only solution we have is a spiritual solution intended to remedy our spiritual malady, our unmanageability. And once I straighten out that way, my mental obsession is simply not going to kick in. I will be able to differentiate the true from the false. And more than that, those 10-step promises, I just won't even be thinking about drinking. I won't have a bad relationship with alcohol. I won't have any relationship with alcohol. The problem's just going to get removed. And when I don't drink, it doesn't pass my lips, I'm not going to trigger the allergy. Order of operations here.
Yeah, Angela brought something up, and don't mean to make light of it by any means. Brought up in the chat, suicidal or homicidal, right? Absolutely. But homicidal, that's me. I'm more homicidal than I am suicidal. In untreated alcoholism, prior to I got here, that's your life over mine all day long. You know, I never had the courage. I always wanted to run into a tree and not get hurt, but so everybody could feel sorry for me because I'm just so tired from working all the time. And the delusion is that I was drinking and drugging, and I just need. I'm full of self-pity, self-reliance, fear. Fear is driven by self-reliance. Self-reliance is as good as as far as it goes, but it's not going to be good enough. So this is why we got to get down to causes and conditions. They talk about the cause could be fear. The condition will be self-will, self-reliance. Cause and conditions need to be truth finding. I need to find the truth. And the illustration that David's going to pull up here in a little bit helps me do that. Now we're going to get into, as we finish this paragraph, we're going to finally get into some columns here of what our written inventory looks like.
So we need to overcome the spiritual malady. And how we're going to do that is the understanding we've done. I was going to say the work we've done in the first 3 steps. It's not really any work in the first 3 steps. The only work is to make sure I understand them, right? And start to push myself to change my thinking a little bit, start to let go of some prejudices, make a decision. Making a decision is easy. Following through on the decision is now what we're talking about. So I'm going to start to get spiritually healed by continuing to work. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Okay? Not making a mental journal here. Set them on paper. Okay? We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. Let's pause there.
Okay, so that's column 1, right? That's column one. What are institutions? Because I had a hard time with this. Maybe you will do too, maybe not. Institutions, the IRS, the military,
Hmm.
church, synagogue,
Hmm. You say
Republican
the
Party,
IRS?
IRS. I did. That was first.
Yeah, okay. Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. I'm sorry. IRS, military, church, Republican Party, Democratic Party, whatever party. All these things could be institutions. The police, the fire department,
Yeah, Microsoft,
institutions.
Facebook,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
The neighborhood
Absolutely.
association.
Yes. Principles. Maybe you go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and they say, this is the one I had. I had it on my list. Just don't drink and go to meetings. I know I don't have resentment against that today, but I freaking hate when people say that, because if I could just drink and don't go to meetings, I wouldn't go to meetings if I could just not drink. Why would I go hang around with you people? And why would you hang around with me if I could just not drink and go to meetings? So that was the thing that I could write down. Anything that principle that popped up, or all kinds of silly things. And then, but it talks about there, we listed the people. This is column one. Institutions, column one. Principles, which is column one. We start with column one. We start from the top and we go to the bottom. We don't go left to right. We go up and down. And then, did you go to the second column there or no?
I
We
did
asked
not.
ourselves why. Okay.
Nope, not
Well,
yet.
the only thing I want to say about this real quickly then is I know who I am angry with.
Yeah.
I've always known who I was angry with. My mom, my dad, that teacher, that boss, that girlfriend, that boyfriend, whatever. I've always known that. So it shouldn't be very hard for me to have a nice long list in column one.
Yeah, I think the fourth step of every step, and probably because for many reasons, including it's the first real action step. It's being, faced with an exercise it's a, many of us had never attempted. None of us had ever attempted a moral inventory, right? There's so much foreign and scary and unknown. So I think a lot of people get confused about how to write the inventory. But if we just stop and read this with someone who's done it before, the directions here are actually very clear and very black and white. And to David's point, when I start writing column one, and if you want to just sneak preview, look ahead to the chart on the next page, right? On page 65, you'll see the I'm resentful at column. That's all we're talking about so far, where we put the people, the institutions, and the principles. Listen, the people we know. I'd start writing. Everybody starts writing. I was 31 years old when I did my first four-step inventory. I had some people going back to when I was 3 and 4 years old. Some of my earliest memories were resentments. And I carried it with me until I was a grown-ass man. How embarrassingly, but that's sort of thorough and honest, right? I go back to my life. The names of the people are easy. Most of the time, the institutions are pretty easy too, right? We got a lot of those usual suspects like David talked about, right? Like churches and schools and government agencies and big businesses, oil companies, all of these things, right? The principles one sometimes takes a little bit of, I don't know, brainstorming, talking it through maybe with a running buddy or a sponsor. I always come up with like these examples. Here's the ones, in the Western world, right? Like, at least in my generation, boys don't cry, right? I'm supposed to grow up and be a tough guy and a breadwinner, and I'm never supposed to show any fear or any emotion or anything. I'm supposed to be this manly man, right? That's a principle. Now, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong or who says it. That's just sort of in the ether, right? Or like, again, like good girls keep their legs crossed. It's like principles of limitations on women's ability to have the sex life that they like, right? These are all ideas that are out there that are thrust upon us that we can easily be resentful about, right? Maybe even things out of like the Bible, right? Do unto others you haven't done unto you, and be like, man, I do that all the time, and nobody does back for me. I don't like that, right? These are ideas, these are concepts, they're philosophies or ideologies, right? If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Column two, so again, sneak peek on the 65 there. Now we're going to look at the cause column. So we asked ourselves why we were angry. It's pretty easy too. So I've done lots of therapy in addition to recovery. And I talk about this. I did therapy before recovery and after. Therapy before recovery, colossal waste of time and money. Therapy after recovery, a wonderful investment of time and money. And why do I bring this up? Is therapy is very different than recovery. And sometimes it takes both of these things for me to get healthy. In therapy, my therapist always wanted to know, David, who were you upset with as a little boy, and why? What was the cause? What did those people do to you? And let's and I'm not making light of this because this was important, for me to do this stuff too. What did you lose when you were a child? It's okay that you're angry about these things. In our first couple of columns here, I never got beyond that in therapy. The therapist always wanted to tell me it was okay to sort of feel this way, and I had to write to them, and I do. That's the easy stuff, guys. And we're going to get further in this inventory where we're going to take on this other perspective. But my point in this is we have at times, whether we've done it formally, informally, or just over and over in our heads, we are so crystal clear on who hurt us and how they hurt us. This should be easy stuff to write down as well. Again, I know you guys are like me. These things were spinning through your head. I didn't have to go do a lot of deep diving. And then what happened once I had pages and pages and pages of this, then I wanted to dig deeper because I wanted to be thorough. I didn't want anything left. I wanted a gold star from my sponsor and from God. It said, man, you did it right. You did it all. You were honest. And I pushed myself to do this. But man, 98% of this ought to just flow out as if someone was writing with your hand. I mean, that was really my experience once I got over my fear and just got into it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with David more. I remember my first sponsor said, here's the list. Here's your worksheet. Start with your resentments, get on your knees and ask God to help you write it. I went downstairs in my basement. I had a little desk downstairs with a light. I got on my knees and asked God to write it, just like David's experience. I could not believe how the pen would just flow. And I don't remember the time frame exactly, but I would think within an hour or two, I had all 3 inventories done. I followed directions in the book. I called my sponsor. I went over to his house. We did my 5th step that night. Yeah. One day, couple hours. Why not? I got to get free. David talked about there. We asked ourselves why we're angry. Again, I said it the first count. I know who I'm angry at. I know exactly why I'm angry. Well, some of it I know why I'm angry. Some of it's delusional. But for the most part, I lived in that bar stool or in that crack house, and I knew exactly who I was angry at and why I was angry at you. So those 2 columns are a piece of cake.
And the delusional doesn't make it any less powerful. We're going to read this. The wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to kill. Guys, when I go back and I think about that first 4-step I wrote, 40 pages typed, man, there was so much content in there. But what I can't tell you was, I could tell you some things that I'm certain really happened, but there's some stuff that I know that was on that inventory that I'm not sure if it really happened or not, that I couldn't tell you fancied or real, but it affected me in the same way. And which arguments are worse? The ones you really have with another human being that lasted 6 minutes, or the ones you had in your mind with that person that lasted months or years? Fancied or real, it's got the power to kill. So we listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. Column 2, we asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, I need more light in here. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up. Go ahead, David.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Abby. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Please.
Okay.
No, 100%.
So I've got a couple, and by a couple, I mean like 5.
Take your time.
So I have resentment, which is indignant displeasure because of something regarded as wrong, and insult, often with animosity. I have malady, which is any disease of the human body or a moral or mental defect or disorder. Principles, which are basic truth, laws, standards, qualities, assumptions, or code of conduct. Self-esteem, which is self-respect, also self-conceit, and sore, which is irritated or disgruntled.
Thank you.
Thank
And you'll throw all them in the chat. Those definitions are on WhatsApp, right? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so what we're talking about, in most cases, we found that our self-esteem, how I feel about myself internally, how that anger of that person, let's throw mom in there, and what she did to anger me, and how it affected me internally. And then my pocketbook, that's old language, right? I remember my grandmother having a pocketbook, right? Called a purse today, probably, or a wallet. My ambitions, though. So my parents told me, you can't do that. That's for other people. Shot down my hopes and dreams. You can't go to college. We work. We're blue collar people. Those are my ambitions. And of course, personal relationships, it's a gimme. And including sex. We're hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up like a match. Burned up. That's the example that I have. Went back through our lives as far back as I could go. As far back as David brought it up early. He went back all the way to he was 3 years old. I think I went back till I was 5 in kindergarten. When my kindergarten teacher embarrassed me in front of the whole class. It seemed minute, but it's valid. It's crucial. It's vital that I wrote down. And here's what I ask my guys when they're like stumped on this. What resentment do you have currently? Start there. And the mind will open up. Did you pray first? But what resentment do you have currently?
Only because David said this in kindergarten, and I think the teacher would go to jail for this today. I was too talkative. Shocking. I know none of you are going to believe that. My buddy and I were talking too much, and the kindergarten teacher kept saying, stop talking, stop talking, stop talking. And then she put masking tape over our mouths, right? And then we thought it was hysterical, and we took crayons and drew lips on them, right? But I remembered that, right? That was on my 4-step list. Right. Okay, so this is a good time to let's take a look at this little sheet we have. Now, this is so David and I are pretty big book purists, fundamentalists, and we don't think that creating a document to facilitate the work flies in the face of it. You might feel differently as a sponsor, or your sponsor may, and that's okay. That's okay. We're just showing this as a tool. Okay. Now, everybody has to promise not to look at the 4th column because we're not going to talk about that yet, right? Okay. So what you see here is we've got a little worksheet that is consistent with what we've been reading in the book. Where did everybody go? Everybody's right over here. Okay. So if you look at column 1, we've got I am resentful at. Oh, and I should say, guys, these are available. There's a PDF version that I'm showing here and an Excel version. If you go to purposeofthisbook.com and go down to the bottom of the main, there's only one page, bottom of the page, you'll see links to this. So if you want to download them and look at them or use them, that's what they're there for. So column 1 on page 65, I'm resentful at. Column 1 here on a little worksheet, I am resentful at. Okay, I guess I did I am instead of I'm, so I'll make that change. Column 2 on page 65, the cause. Column 2, right here on a little worksheet, the cause. And then the book gave us that whole laundry list of how I am affected. And the reason it's nice, the reason why I think we like the worksheet is it keeps the inventory taker centered on exactly what I'm supposed to write. So the name of the person, institution, or the principal, why I'm angry at them, and then the book just says, why am I angry? In most cases, it was found that it was our self-esteem. Here's this right here, right? Our pocketbooks right there, our ambitions, our personal relationships, our sex relations, because it's sort of split, right? Personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. Now, we also added in pride and fear, even though they're not in that serialized list, because if you look in the chart on 65, it includes those as well. Right. So we grabbed the 2 sort of references and we brought it together. So if you're filling this out, like David said, go column at a time. So start, first, who's first on the list? It's probably going to be mom or dad. All right. So, and if you get a whole bunch of them with mom, you might just put mom right here in the first cell, and you might go to another page because you're going to be filling a lot of stuff. Right. Or you could just start listing names: mom, dad, brother, sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, ex, kindergarten teacher with the tape on my mouth. And then you can always add backup sheets, but go all the way through your I am resentful column, just as David said, until you run out of names. And there's going to be more direction on how to do that as well. Then you're going to go down, back down the list and throw in all the causes, right? I'm resentful at my kindergarten teacher. The cause, she put masking tape on my mouth when I wouldn't be quiet. Okay. So I'm going to go down all through that second column. And then we're going to have.
Can I jump in on that one?
Yeah,
Can
please,
I jump in on it too?
Please.
And
yeah.
David did a wonderful job of that. Bullet points, guys, on the second column.
Yeah.
If you look at the illustration on page 65, Bill did 19 words or less.
That's
you know
right.
exactly why they're angry.
Thank you.
This is let's get right to it. Let's not drag this thing out. This is not a drunken log. This is a inventory sheet. David said we start with the first column, finish it, second column, the cause. But again, bullet points. You know exactly why they're angry. Or you're angry at them.
So as shown in the chart, David pointed out, no cause is more than 19 words. So that's what we use, just arbitrarily. We're saying if that's what Bill does an example, I don't need to write more than 19 words. And why is that a good idea? Because I will start to write a novel. And I'm not really angry about, oh, well, then this happened and they said this. No. The person punched me. The person stole from me. The person embarrassed me. You know what I mean? My friend's parent talked down to me. You know, all these things. The bank wouldn't let me open a checking account because my credit score was bad, right? It's simple, guys, right? And then we come back in the effects by the third column. So I'm just going to use this example. Oh, I'm going to say this for next week. We're going to do a little exercise. Okay, we did this, David and I and our friend Heather, when we did a 12-week step workshop. I'm going to encourage everybody for next week, go to the website, purposelessbook.com, download PDF for the Excel version. And as we go back through this next week, everyone can write one out. You don't have to share it. It's just for your benefit. But sometimes the exercise of writing one out is very healthy to cement some of these concepts. Okay, so that's everybody's homework. Make sure you download this for next week. So how did that experience with my kindergarten teacher taping my mouth? Which part of self was affected? Well, it affected my self-esteem, right? How I felt about myself. I was embarrassed, right? Did it affect my pocketbook? No. Right? Did it affect my ambitions? I don't know, maybe to be the class clown. I don't know. Did it affect my security? Personal relations? Yeah, my relationship with my teacher. Right? Did it affect my sex relations? Certainly not. My pride? Yeah. You know, what's my pride? It's how I want you guys to see me, right? I want to be the cool guy. I want to be the guy who can talk in class and get away with murder. My teacher put an end to that, right? And did it affect my fear? Probably had some fear about what my mom was going to say about this if my teacher decided to tell it to her, which I don't think she did. God bless her, Mrs. Simonek. She's probably long since dead. What else you got, David, on this?
Well, and you guys, David and I are not going to do this, but if you want to know more about what basic instincts look like, you can go to the 12 and 12 and go to page 42 and read 42, 43, and 44. And what we'll find out is how often they far exceed their proper functions. So it's just Bill, obviously wrote this, and him and Father Dowling helped out with this, and I think it was published in 1953. But Father Dowling worked from 1940 until the time the book was published with Bill, the 12 and 12. And it's just Bill's experience with a few 24 hours. There's no direction. It's a good commentary. And it's just anytime I do a 4-step with someone, I will probably go to page 42, 43, and 44 of the 12 and 12, just with them. But most of the time I stay true to the book. That's all I got there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just read this last paragraph because it really, I should have probably read it before we got into that, but that's okay. Let me just stop the share for a sec here. We'll bring this back up next week. So on our top of 65, on our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem or security, our ambitions, or personal sex relations which had been interfered with? We're usually as definite as this example. And maybe we'll just sort of pause here and we'll get into the example and then starting to fill out the sheets a little bit more next week. We should also mention this. So again, where we are here in the 4-step. So, we made our decision in 3, and then next we launched out on a course of vigorous action. What is the vigorous action? It's a whole lot of intensive writing. It's this inventory taking. And then we got right into resentments, and there's going to be more on resentments. And it's some of my favorite content in the book. But David talked about the 4-step being the mother of all inventories. There's 3 inventories here, right? And we're going to take them in order as they come up in the book. So right now, we're just talking about the resentment inventory. Then we're going to talk about the fear inventory. And then the third part is the sex harms inventory. Okay, so each one is going to get their due. All of it we're going to color out of the book, and we actually have a worksheet for each of those 3 as well. I think, David, unless you have anything else, we'll just wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we looked at that paragraph, it's column 1, column 2, column 3, and then, like I said before, the basic instincts, if you want to really enhance them a little bit, look on page 42 through 44 in the 12 and 12. But that's where we'll stop tonight, guys.
Yeah, and I actually think getting into that stuff in the 12 and 12, my opinion, is almost like for your second time through.
Yeah, probably.
First time, keep it simple, straight out of the book. Like we did, Joe and Charlie, the amazing Joe and Charlie, they have a worksheet that we were inspired by where they do weave those concepts from the 12 and 12, which sort of surprised me. And they talk about it in Big Book Comes Alive, because what Joe and Charlie do is they're so masterful at keeping things simple for us. And all due respect to those 2 heroes, I think it just makes it a little more complex to weave in the 12 and 12 stuff on the first time through. That's all. Okay, one sec, guys, and then we're going to pray our way out here.